Please be seated. Thank you, Pastor Brown, and thank you, Chief Apostle. First of all, thank all of you for taking time out of your busy day to be with us here today. Let me begin by thanking Florida Power and Light for sponsoring our coffee social. Mr. Bernard Johnson, you're in the audience someplace. Would you stand up and be recognized, please? We'll pass the applause on to him when I see him the next time. And this morning and this afternoon, Eglin Federal Credit Union will be supplying our lunch. Nico, did you leave also, or are you out there?
No.
There you are, Nico. Thank you so much. I believe you'll find this event well worth your time. In addition to our presentations today, we have around the hall helping us agencies for education, agencies for prevention, resources for referral, and opportunities for rehabilitation. Please take advantage of the visiting and by visiting them during your breaks, during lunch, and even after the presentations today. America's overdose epidemic is currently at a level we have never experienced before. The nation is now facing the tragic combined effects of a mental health and overdose crisis that must be met with an urgent response in order to save lives. Since the beginning of 2020, we have seen a rise in the number of overdose deaths in communities all around the nation. In Florida, we have experienced skyrocketing rates with more than a 90% increase, 39% increase in overdose deaths in 1 year. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention estimates that more than 100,000, let me repeat that, over 100,000 Americans were lost to overdose deaths in a 12-month period, with more than 7,800 right here in Florida. I guarantee you, when Mr. Bailey comes up, he'll update that with even more horrid numbers. I'm going to quote some things that I ripped from the headline just recently. Quote, Florida has reached an opioid settlement topping $807 million. That was from WFSU, March 2022. Again, Mr. Bailey will undoubtedly update that amount as we continue to settle more and more lawsuits. Cities, counties in Florida file suits over opioid epidemic. That was from the city and state of Florida in December 2022. Fentanyl deaths in Northwest Florida, that's us people, Northwest Florida, increased by 354% in 2021, according to the Pensacola News Journal, May 2022. Santa Rosa County, to help rising opioid numbers with a new treatment center, WKRG Channel 5, June 2021. Former Walmart pharmacists said the company ignored red flags as opioid sales boomed. According to WUWF, January 2021. West Point cadet sickened by fentanyl-laced cocaine. By the Associated Press, April 2022. 23 opioid overdoses in Escambia last week. Pensacola News Journal, November 2022. And Pensacola drug bust nets enough fentanyl to kill 800,000 people. That's enough to kill every person in Escambia County, Santa Rosa County, Okaloosa County, and Walton County. 800,000 people, according to Pensacola News Journal, December of just a month ago, December 2022. So why is Crestview hosting this summit, and why do we go regional with it? Sometime last year, I was in a webinar with the Florida League of Mayors, and I heard a presentation about opioids from Mr. Andre Bailey. He blew me away with the information I had never heard before. You see, we all know we have a drug problem in this nation. We all know that opioids are devastating. And we all know that they're having a greater effect than they've ever had before. What I didn't know is how bad it had gotten over the last few years across the nation, across the state of Florida, here in the northwest portion of the state, here in Okaloosa County, and right here in my own city. When I heard Mr. Bailey say that he had held overdose summits in Miami, Tampa, Jacksonville, and St. Pete, I called him and I asked him, why not Crestview? After explaining to him where Crestview was,
I figured it out.
he agreed to come. As I told you last night, I was shocked but overjoyed that you agreed to do that. That was back last summer, and we projected this summit to take place in September of last year. Well, thanks to Hurricane Ian and some other complicating factors, this is the September summit. Now, we could not have put this together without some amazing partnerships in this process, starting with, of course, Mr. Bailey himself, the founder and CEO of Project Opioid, whom I will introduce shortly. Others joining us in this partnership are Florida Blue, who has a continuing partnership with Project Opioid, but could not be with us today. The Okaloosa County Health Department, Signs of Hope, a brand new company in Crestview who has agreed to donate a billboard in order to advertise what we're going to do after our overdose summit today. And we had a long-term engagement from the Northwest Florida League of Cities, because I brought this project to the Northwest Florida League of Cities Board of Directors early last year and suggested we coordinate this event as part of one of our strategic goals to identify common problems across Northwest Florida and come together to discuss solutions. They immediately jumped aboard and have been responsible for multiple registrations. I'll repeat that, multiple registrations. On behalf of the Northwest Florida League of Cities, I would like to introduce the president of that league, Shalimar Mayor Mark Franks, to make a few remarks. Mark, if you would, please.
Thank you. Good morning. I am Mark Franks, Mayor of the great town of Shalimar and President of the Northwest Florida League of Cities for this year. It's an honor for the Northwest Florida League to partner with Mayor Whitten and the Project Opioid leadership team. As we come together today, our goal is to discuss and formulate an action plan to combat this epidemic that affects every community at the local, regional, and state levels. And I just heard you say 39% increase in overdose deaths in Florida in the last year. So this is serious. So it's my hope that together, today, we can embrace an approach to address the crisis facing us and discuss actionable plans to save lives in our communities. Again, it's an honor to be here with you all, and thanks to each one of you for joining us for today's Opioid Overdose Summit. Thank you, Mayor.
As soon as my tablet is working here, we'll be okay. Thank you, Mark. I want to especially recognize the Executive Director of the Northwest Florida League of Cities, Jenny Anderson. Jenny, where are you? I will guarantee you I drove her absolutely crazy over the registration process. Thank you so much for tolerating me. As I mentioned earlier, one of the partners in this summit is Florida Blue, who could not be with us today, but they are a continuing funding source for Project Opioid, and so we should give them credit for that. Not to be neglected is a great support we have received from Okaloosa County Health Department. All the signage, notepads, pens, and travel and lodging arrangements for Mr. Bailey was paid for by that department. Beth Smith, would you please stand up and be recognized for the health department for what you do? I would be remiss if I didn't recognize the amazing support that I received locally from our elected officials, our city manager, my executive assistant, the Parks and Recreation people, the administration department, public services, our finance department, our police and fire departments. You see, people, it's always one team that comes together to put these kind of things on. I thank you so much for that kind of support. But I do want to recognize, in particular, our Public Information Office. They put so many hours into this event. Chance, Peyton, wherever you are. Yes, Peyton, Chance, come on down. Chance had a full head of hair when we started this project. All right, I promise I wouldn't be humorous today, I'm sorry. We invited the Florida Attorney General, Ashley Moody, to be with us today, and although she couldn't be here, she did send this video, which we will now play for you.
I'm Attorney General Ashley Moody, and ending the opioid crisis is a top priority of our administration. Earlier this year, we secured historic agreements through our litigation to hold opioid distributors, manufacturers, and pharmaceutical companies accountable for their role in fueling the opioid crisis. Through these efforts, we recovered more than $3 billion to help mitigate the effects of substance abuse in our communities. I'm proud of the grit and determination of our team of attorneys and how they demonstrated the will to fight to secure these monumental wins for Florida. But we will not rest on our laurels. More than 100,000 people died in the United States from drug overdoses last year, largely due to synthetic opioids like fentanyl. The substance abuse claims tens of thousands of lives across our nation annually, and so many here in Florida. These are terrible statistics that will only get worse as fentanyl continues to flood across our southwest border from Mexico. And we are now seeing rainbow-colored fentanyl pills designed to attract our youth. So I want to encourage parents to discuss the dangers of drug use with your children. Make sure they understand that just one pill can kill. Earlier this month, I met with former federal officials, Families Against Fentanyl, and law enforcement leaders in a security briefing regarding the threat posed by the massive amounts of this synthetic opioid entering our country. Additionally, I've led a bipartisan coalition of attorneys general demanding that the President and Congress declare this highly lethal substance a weapon of mass destruction. While these are important efforts, government action alone will not end this crisis. People struggling with addiction need help. And that's why I joined Shatterproof for the state launch of Atlas, a treatment locator tool. Atlas is a free program that helps patients find treatment services and facilities nearby, while also accounting for financial factors. I'm proud to say this program is now available statewide here in Florida, in part because of funds we were able to secure through our legal efforts to fight the opioid crisis. You can access this program at treatmentatlas.org, and additional resources can be found on our doseofrealityfl.com website. Thank you for taking the time to attend this important summit and for joining our fight to end the opioid epidemic and build a stronger, safer Florida.
Well, we know we have her on our side, that's for sure. At this time, I invite the Crestview Chief of Police, Steve McCosker, to share with us his perception of the opioid crisis right here in Crestview.
Good morning. Good morning. So I was asked by the mayor to go ahead and speak, and one of the things that I didn't want to do is go ahead and repeat a whole bunch of stats and numbers and gloom and doom that everyone in this room already knows or realizes that it's changing every day. So I wanted to give you a little bit of insight on my law enforcement journey and how the opioid crisis has impacted it. So looking around the room, because a lot of times I'm speaking to younger people, a lot younger people, that I started my career before they actually were even born. So you have to change it up a little bit. But looking around the room, I can tell that some people could remember the 80s. Anybody remember the 80s? Anybody a teenager in the 80s? Okay. So we all remember the neon colored clothes. We all remember the toxic level of hairspray to get that hair teased just right. We all remember MTV. But we also remember the dark side. One of the things that we remember is in 1981 we got the first U.S. case of AIDS had reached the United States, and that disease went ahead and spread quickly and was far-reaching. And so you might be wondering, well, why are you talking about the AIDS problem when we're here for the opioid crisis? Well, as people became more and more comfortable speaking about AIDS and making people aware about the transmission of AIDS, the first thing they taught us all, and they did mass campaigns on it, was we should practice safe sex. That was one of the things that they went ahead and said. The other thing was they did a big push on clean needles. It was a huge push, and so in 1981, I'm 11 years old, so safe sex thing I may or may not have understood. The needle thing I didn't get at all. And so my career started in 1991. I was very fortunate that a few years into my career, by 1997, I was able to go ahead and fulfill one of my law enforcement dreams, which was to be an undercover narc. And so I went ahead and did what all undercover narcs do. You dream about being Don Johnson with the fast car and cool looks. And so the first thing I did was I grew myself a sweet mullet and some pointy sideburns. So I went in there thinking I was going to be Don Johnson and walked out of there looking like Joe Dirt. But during that time, in order to go ahead and be qualified to do that type of job, is they send you to DEA basic, Drug Enforcement Agency basic school, and they teach you all about how to work drugs, what drugs do, and what problems are out there. Part of that class was to talk about what was on the rise. Right? And so what was on the rise in 1997 was the reintroduction of heroin. See, what we didn't realize in the 80s when they were teaching us how to go ahead and protect ourselves through sex or protect ourselves with clean needles, what they were doing was they were making everybody aware of hey, this heroin stuff that has to be injected is dangerous. And so people that weren't on that forefront, who weren't constantly thinking about it, didn't really get it. So it wasn't until 1997 when I started putting together the facts where I went, wait a minute, we were pretty successful on lowering the heroin use because of the fact that everybody thought it was dangerous. Well, bad guys don't go away, they just find new ways of being bad guys. And so what did they do is they reintroduced heroin into our ports, like Miami, where it was coming in at 97, 98% pure. And so what we've seen was an immediate spike in the older generation, hippie generation, quickly dying off because this was no longer your grandpa's heroin. This was coming in 97% pure, and they were going ahead and introducing it into the system through the needles, and it was killing them. And so what they did was the bad guys remarketed it that no, you don't have to use the needles anymore. It's just so pure you can go ahead and snort it. And so right around that time, 97, 98, we started to see this introduction of new customers for heroin. And so obviously with it being on the rise, we did everything we could to go ahead and capture and eradicate it the best we could. And so we did use a lot of techniques. And one of the cases that I remember from like 98 was we were doing a surveillance on a bad guy, and he went ahead and he was 18, 19 years old himself, and he went into a local restaurant. It was a diner, and he sat in the diner in the middle of the Orlando area, and people came to him all morning to go ahead and buy heroin. Well, 18, 19 years old, who was he selling to? He was selling to his friends and people that he knew. And so those people that he knew, who were they? They were high school students. And they weren't students that were on the fringe. There was cheerleaders that came through. There were football players that came through. There was a whole assortment of it. And one by one, as these people left, people were waiting to go ahead and effect an arrest. Imagine introducing that much, that powerful of a drug into a high school situation, and people of all walks of life just walking in there and partaking in that. It was really an eye-opening experience for me to see how quickly and how widespread that this was happening. So we fast forward, and then now you have people addicted to heroin and opioids, and then you have the introduction of the opioid pills. And so not only do you have it coming in illegal ways, then you have it coming in legal ways where doctors are over-prescribing medication and constantly prescribing medication. And this had a profound impact on my career. In 2007, I was promoted to lieutenant, and one of my assignments was I was supposed to go ahead and move dispatch. We wanted to move the dispatch center to another location, and so the lady that was over dispatch, she was a little bit older and had some health issues, and we drove over to the facility to look at it, and trying to make small talk. We were talking about how everything was going, and she told me how great everything was going in her life and how great everything was going at work. And then she concluded with the sentence, and everything would be perfect if the chief would just stop my pain medicine from me. In 2007, somebody that had inspirations of going ahead and going a lot further in my career, hearing that the police chief was bumming opioid pills from a dispatch supervisor was not the exact information I wanted to hear at that time. So again, we went ahead but at the same time, it opened my eyes to a lot of things that I didn't understand. I didn't understand why a chief that was only in his 50s was so tired and was taking naps in the middle of the day, because it was on the nod. I didn't understand why one minute he was really happy and excited to go ahead about the day, and the next minute he's yelling like a maniac and not making any sense, and we can't figure out what direction he actually wants us to go into. So with that one statement, all of a sudden that all became very clear. How somebody that lived at another agency for so many years, came highly recommended, and then comes to our department, and it's like, this guy's a lunatic. It's such a bad problem that they didn't fire him. They said, well, let's go get you help. He didn't want the help. So what happens is people become blinded to the fact that they're actually addicted, and he doesn't even realize in the position that he is that he's an addict, and they're trying to get him help so they can save his career. He'd rather have walked away from his career. That's somebody who had a 35-year career in law enforcement that legitimately got pain medicine from a doctor, and now is in the newspaper and everything else like that, and without a career, because of the fact that he was addicted and he didn't have enough personal resources to identify that that's what the problem is. So you move all that forward, and then in 2019 I wound up here in Crestview, and by this time, when the officers are already carrying the Narcan, by this time people are openly speaking about what the problem is, and so our officers start administering Narcan. So last year alone, we had 79 overdose calls that we're aware of, and so that requires a great deal of resources to go to these calls and hopefully bring the person back. It also takes a lot of resources when the major in the back of the room there just went ahead and finished a traffic homicide case where both the victim that got run over while he was on a motorcycle and the person driving the car that did the running over are both high with a mix of drugs, not just heroin or opioids, but what we're seeing now is people are using poly drug mixes more, where my drug of choice may be cocaine, but it's not available, so some meth's around, and then there's this other stuff, I'm not even sure what it is, but I can snort it, and so that's what we're seeing right now today, is that from all different walks of life, doesn't have any economic barriers, we're seeing people not only using opioids and putting their lives at risk and other people's lives at risk. And again, I'm grateful to have a job, but it really takes a lot of resources to go ahead and constantly go to these drug-related calls. It's taking resources away from y'all because unfortunately a lot of these people aren't productive members of society, so you can't leave the cars unlocked, can't leave the front door unlocked because they're going to come in and they're going to take your stuff. And so even if drugs haven't impacted our lives directly, they are impacting our lives and how we go ahead and live. So that's something that we're having to face on a daily basis. So to bore you with one stat, like I said, we had 79 cases. So that basically is like 6.5 a month where we're going to overdose related calls of service. The good news is that our officers are very aware of the problem. They know the dangers now of the fentanyl that they could be introduced to. They have their Narcan. They know how to go ahead and use it. They do go ahead and use it. And so that's keeping members of our society safe. It also gives them one more opportunity to go ahead and try to get their life straight. And so it's through a lot of the organizations that sometimes, very unfortunately, it takes that actual act of overdosing for somebody to go ahead and realize that they were lucky, and they start reaching out for the different organizations within our community. And it's very exciting to know that our Citizen of the Year, the work that she did was mainly with homeless and drug addiction, and the city stepped up and recognized how important that work is to the City of Crestview. And I really appreciate you all for being here. I am amazed at the number of people that are here. So it's a very exciting event to go ahead and be part of, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Wow, that's great. Thank you, Chief. This is a regional summit, therefore I'd like to bring up the Fort Walton Beach Chief of Police, Robert Page, to share his perception of the crisis in Fort Walton Beach.
Well, good morning. My name is Robert Page, Chief of Police for the City of Fort Walton Beach. And the mayor reached out to me to ask me for a perspective from the Fort Walton Beach community for the opioid crisis in our community as a whole. And I agree with a lot of what Chief McCosker said. I actually agree with everything that he said. And I think he gave a very touching, personal, firsthand account. I'm a little bit more of a stat-driven person. I've wore a uniform all my 25 years and never got a Joe Dirt haircut or anything like that. So my speech may be a little bit more boring, and I may have a few more stats that I want to provide out. But I can tell you in the City of Fort Walton Beach, and I'm going to use the year 2019 for our reference, our baseline, because prior to 2019, we really didn't keep great stats on overdoses. We would stat them as assisting fire rescue, medical emergency, but in 2019, we started to see that increase in the overdoses. So we did a lot better job in our record keeping. So I'm going to refer back to everything as 2019. So from 2019 through all of 2022, we've seen an increase every single year in overdose calls. And from 2019 through the end of 2022, we've seen a 100% increase. So our overdoses were 100% greater in 2022 as they were in 2019. Narcan. Narcan is something that is a miracle drug. I've seen Narcan given to somebody that is overdosing. You'll see somebody that is at the doorstep of death that will come back when they're given Narcan. But we have seen our Narcan go up 150% since 2019, the amount of Narcan that we give out. When I was down in South Florida, we hardly gave out any Narcan, and I can tell you that is a bigger difference. I don't know in the last 4 years in South Florida if Narcan has gone up, but I can tell you from my first day here in the Panhandle, I'd seen a lot more Narcan going out than I would in South Florida. So questions were asked, who's overdosing? Who are we responding to? And so we did a lot of research. And we looked into it because everybody had the perception that it was not city residents, that this is not a Fort Walton problem. This is a problem with people coming down from the Midwest. This is a problem with people passing through the neighborhood. But this is not a Fort Walton problem. We were wrong. 58% of the people that we were going to on overdose calls were city residents. So it was a Fort Walton problem. This was a problem that was affecting the residents of the city of Fort Walton. We also had heard that this issue was an issue of the homeless. This is an issue of vagrants, people traveling through. This is not an issue of the working class. This is not an issue of the upper class. When we looked at our stats, only 10% of the overdose calls were for people that were homeless. So that was another misnomer that we kind of had to adjust our approach to. Then we wanted to dive in a little bit further to say, okay, who is it really affecting? And at least in the city of Fort Walton Beach, it's 78% male and 60% between the ages of 25 and 45. So it kind of showed us who our target audience was, who is likely to overdose. Now, that is one of the reasons I wanted to come to this summit, and I think that's one of the reasons we need to have these gatherings, because now we've identified who our likely overdose people are. Now, there's older people, younger people that overdose, but at least we have a targeted audience to start looking at. Because the problem we have is I don't believe the size of the epidemic is properly understood by the population as a whole. That it falls just under the radar of consciousness of most people. The people in this room may know, but the average person out there, and it's weird because a lot of them will be touched by it somehow, like the chief said, indirectly, but 100,000 people in a rolling 12-month period since 2021 have died. In every 12-month rolling period, you have 100,000 deaths. That is the equivalent of fighting the Vietnam War and the Korean War in the same year and still having more people die from drug overdoses than from war. And I think when you look at those numbers and you really look at how large they are, there has to be something done. Because there is a war being fought on our streets, and there's no invasion from a foreign country. It is a war that the addiction and the overdose and the death that is brought to our communities. As a police chief, or even as a police officer, it is the worst thing to go to a family and tell them one of their loved members have passed away. It is the worst thing to be there to see that last breath taken. And I think as a society and as a community, we have to do everything possible to prevent that from happening going forward. And I think this summit is a good start, but I think we need to take those next steps and truly tackle the underlying problems that are causing these epidemics to come about. I heard the mayor talk about in Pensacola that Pensacola Police Department had enough fentanyl to kill every single person in Escambia County, 90-something thousand people. Last weekend, we saw 5 people hanging out in front of an apartment building. A keen officer recognized that it was probably some type of narcotics action going on. He was going to the apartment for a different call. He paused from the call he was going on to, approached the 5 individuals that all fled, called additional officers there. They were able to find and detain the 5 individuals, get 2 warrants, one for the car they were hanging outside of, and one for the apartment that they were out hanging around. They were able to recover 91 grams of fentanyl. 91 grams of fentanyl, 2 milligrams is a lethal dose. 91 grams of fentanyl, depending on how pure it was, would be enough to kill every single person in the city of Fort Walton Beach and the city of Crestview put together and still have a few lethal doses left over. So that is to put in perspective of how lethal fentanyl is. You'll see from time to time, accidental. The mayor talked about gummies and other things that have been fentanyl will be pressed into. The fentanyl that we recovered was pressed into counterfeit oxycodone pills. As the chief from Crestview talked about, the drug crisis has always been here. It changes form. It goes from the crack epidemic to prescription drugs to now the fentanyl. But something needs to be done to break the cycle and put a stop to it once and for all. Mayor, I thank you for this opportunity to speak, and I thank everybody for the opportunity and for coming out here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Really appreciate that. It is now my great honor to introduce our keynote speaker for today, the founder and CEO of Project Opioid, Andre Bailey. Andre is the founder and president of Change Everything, an organization committed to creating catalytic transformation of society's most impactful and seemingly unsolvable problems. Working exclusively in the field of social change for the past 20 years, Andre's goal has been to help leaders find collaborative and strategic approaches to solving social problems within our spheres of influence.
I'm very important, you can tell from my bio, right?
To this end, he works with elected officials, business executives, and faith leaders to find real solutions to the critical issues that we're trying to affect. His work focuses on solving important issues like opioid-related overdoses, homelessness, and poverty, bringing together leaders to find solutions that combine compassion with common sense. In 2018, Andre launched Project Opioid, a business, faith, and philanthropic-led collaboration to confront the opioid crisis in communities across Florida. And by the way, he's spreading it beyond Florida now. In partnership with the Florida Blue Foundation, Project Opioid has launched new chapters in the last year to include Jacksonville, Miami, Tampa, West Palm, and Fort Lauderdale. Andre graduated from Heritage University Seminary, where he received a master's degree in divinity. He also completed the Graduate School of Business MBA program at Rollins College and is recognized by Certified Fundraising Executive International as a certified fundraising executive. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Andre Bailey.
Thank you, Mayor. This is before the pandemic when I used to wear a tie, so. Thank you guys for having me here today. Again, I'm Andre Bailey. I'm not too far away from you. I live in Orlando, Florida, so I'm a Floridian, and so honored to be here. When the mayor called and talked about just the passion that this community has to make an impact on this crisis, I said, you know, let's certainly find time to come together and bring the important folks who really are going to have to do the work, right? You need a mayor to help coordinate the resources and the strategy, but at the end of the day, it's going to be you guys who impact this crisis and ultimately save lives. So it's my honor to be here. We're here today to talk mostly about how the overdose crisis has changed and how your community can continue to evolve your work to save lives. I'll tell you that if we were here 6-7 years ago, before fentanyl really expanded across the United States. So fentanyl has been here for a while, illicit fentanyl. But what we're seeing now is fentanyl has changed the overdose crisis in a way that we have to think about what our response is going to be as a community. We have to think about how we're going to help someone who's struggling. What does compassion look like for someone who's on fentanyl and who is now addicted to the most powerful drug we've ever seen in human history? What does compassion look like, and how do we use common sense in getting people help? I'll start by just saying this. Look around this room, look around. I think there's probably, what do you think, Mayor, 100, 120 people here?
No, 175.
175, okay. So roughly the amount, a little bit more, but roughly the amount of people in this room will die in your county every year from opioids. It's staggering. There's different stats depending on what time frame you look at. But right now, in your county, almost 100 young people are dying per year. Almost all of them from fentanyl. And so if you think about, this is not a problem impacting other people, other communities. This is real. This is impacting our kids. We're going to hear some testimonies in a minute of those that have lost loved ones. But I'm going to show you a video. I didn't want to show you a video from your community, so I want to show you a quick video of law enforcement, and thank you to our law enforcement for coming here today. They're on the front lines right now in this crisis. I want to show you what we're seeing, what law enforcement is seeing every single day.
What is the address of the emergency?
Please come now, my daughter's unconscious.
It's the sound of sheer panic.
How old is she?
16. Sophia! Sophia! She's on her back. Please hurry.
Got them on the way.
It was a quiet afternoon near Boulder, Colorado, when Ryan Christoph finds his then 16-year-old daughter, Sophia, barely breathing.
I'm pushing on her chest and it's making some noise, but she's unconscious.
Okay,
And
is she laying flat on her back?
Blue. She's on her back on her bed.
Listen carefully and I'm going to tell you how to do chest compressions.
Within minutes, Sergeant David Cohen with the Lafayette, Colorado Police Department pulls up.
I'm going to count with you, okay? So try and go with the pace I'm counting, okay? Keep up with that pace if you can, okay?
I'm responding with an AED.
Hold on, I think it might be, hold on. Up here, up here!
Upstairs?
Cohen sprinting up the stairs and into Sophia's bedroom.
What is her name?
Sophia!
Let me take over CPR. Sir, does she use narcotics?
Sophia's father telling him he doesn't think so. He only knows of her smoking a little weed, but Officer Cohen's experience told him otherwise.
Lincoln 21, slight pulse and Narcan administered.
As the approaching ambulance gets closer, the Narcan kicks in.
She breathing? She's breathing, yes sir.
Sophia had taken a Percocet that came from a drug dealer, not knowing it was laced with fentanyl, a synthetic opioid used to treat severe pain that is 50 times more powerful than heroin.
So this young lady took what she thought was a prescription pill and ultimately almost died. We know this young lady, we've met her. You guys have seen this. Narcan, how many of you know what Narcan is, obviously, right? So here's what's frightening. It took, they don't say this in the report, it took 4 Narcans to revive her. 4 doses of this to bring her back, because the drugs are becoming more and more powerful, and that is what we are seeing, that's what law enforcement is seeing. I think talking to the mayor and some of your other leaders, your law enforcement in this county is bringing someone back or multiple people back virtually every single day right here in your hometown. And so this is a crisis again that we're all seeing. Your story, my friend, I saw everyone at your table very interested. What is your experience with someone overdosing? Tell your story real briefly.
So I'm a CPA, retired, but I ran a doctor's office, practice administrator. I came in 2009, took over for a friend of mine. We wanted to eliminate the prescriptions for pain medication, so my job, part of it was to eliminate that. Well, we did. They would come in, I mean, they would scream bloody murder. I would send people out to the window, videotape them as they're leaving. You know, 2 or 3 of them fall in the parking lot, but we have it on video, it's a fake. So anyway, that went on. It was a lot of pressure to keep it going. We did eliminate it, and then of course, then they have to go to the streets. So one of them in particular, we know went to the streets and got something that was laced with whatever back then in 2009. Wouldn't have been fentanyl, I don't think. But anyway, they overdosed and died. But you know, you had to stop the doctor from prescribing. You sent them to pain management. Of course, then pain management can't do anything. Later on, it continued to get harder to get the opioids, fortunately.
Thanks, Doug. Give him a round of applause. Again, how many of you have known someone who got addicted to prescription opioids from a doctor? Right? This is, so the crisis really, if you will, started before fentanyl with prescriptions, out of control prescriptions. You guys saw that here in your community. But now, the big challenge we're facing is millions of Americans that were on prescriptions now turning to street drugs that are more dangerous than ever, fentanyl being the one drug that's killing most people. Someone over here, who told the story over here at this table?
I'm just going to try to make this short because it's hard. It's our grandson's mother. She's not our daughter, but she was our grandson's mother, and we cared about her. She had a lot of pain in her arm, and we think, we don't know the story, we think her boyfriend got her on drugs, and she was on meth. We do know she went on meth. She went through a horrible time, homelessness and everything like that with her boyfriend. Finally came to the Lord, came back to the Lord and cleaned herself up, and she was clean until COVID came. And towards the end of COVID, she got back on drugs and she overdosed at her parents' house. And it was just really hard. I didn't know once you were clean. I figured once you're clean, you stay clean. I did not know how many would go back after being clean for a year, or now I've read 2 years or 3 years if I go back. So I did not know that.
Thank you for sharing that. How old was she?
She was in her 30s.
She was in her 30s. How many of you have known someone in their 30s or younger that died? How about 25 and younger? Put your hand up, somebody's saying. How many of you have known someone 20 or younger who overdosed and died? How many of you have known someone in their teens who died? I mean, guys, so this is impacting young people in a way that's unfathomable. And let me just say this. Thank you for sharing that story. And it takes a lot of courage to talk about this. It's a tough topic. But you bring up with this story such an important point. I mean, it's almost like the entire summit today could be around this story right here. Let me tell you why. So I don't know about you guys, but I often eat too many carbohydrates. I just want you to know, you might look at me and think, this guy, he looks great, he doesn't eat that many carbohydrates, but it would be a lie. I mean, I've never met a French fry or a piece of pizza I didn't like. Or a donut. I got here, I was like, Mayor, I mean, we're trying to fight addiction here, buddy, and you're putting those donuts in front of me. So I've tried this low carb diet. Anyone tried these low carb diets, right? I've tried this for a lot of years, and I've had some success, right? But what ends up happening? Inevitably, I get up, this is a true story. A few weeks ago, I get off the plane in Orlando. It's 11 o'clock at night, get in my car. I'm driving home to my apartment, and suddenly the Taco Bell drug dealer starts calling. My worst drug dealer is that young girl called Wendy, with Wendy's. And I'm hungry, there's no other options. And I'm usually strong, but inevitably, Mayor, every now and then, I pull into that drive-thru and relapse on French fries and a Frosty. Now, as you guys know, whenever you're on a diet or you're trying to do something good for yourself, when you fall off, you don't like it. You feel bad. Any of you ever known someone who struggled with alcohol, or you've ever struggled with alcohol? Listen. Relapse is a part of recovery, as some of you, the folks in here will tell you. Here's the problem though, guys. When I pulled into the Taco Bell and I had a Gordita Supreme and a beef Mexi Melt, I didn't die. Because we can get into a lot of, if we're gonna really as a community have a heart-to-heart about where we go from here, I gotta tell you, the fentanyl crisis that exists today, relapse which is a part of recovery, right? Again, like this is, I've been in this work a long time. Relapse now equals death. One time, one pill, as the Attorney General said. One bad day. One bad day used to mean you die. But now that's the crisis, Mayor. So thank you for that story, and I will tell you, this is where we've all got to be open to a conversation. As the mayor said in my bio, I didn't grow up religious, but I decided when I got out of high school to get a master's degree in divinity, so I can read the Bible in Greek and Hebrew, and you want to argue scripture, Baptist, bring it on, you know, I got that. So I'm a person of faith. I went to Crummer Business School. I live in Florida. I mean, guys, you're not going to out-conservative me. I'm just telling you. But as a conservative person, I'm telling you, we've got to think about what it is to tell people to just suck it up and pull yourself up by your bootstraps in an environment where one bad day means you're dead. Does that make sense? Guys, listen, we gotta help people recover. We gotta help people have mental health services. We gotta help people put their lives back together, right? But what was her name? Who died? Keely doesn't get a chance. Keely was in recovery. She was doing better. She was back to the person they knew before. And she just had a bad moment and she was gone. Guys, it wasn't that way a few years ago. We've got to have a conversation about what we do for folks who are struggling. It's very easy, and I'll come back to this in a bit. I want to hear one more story, but I'll come back to this in a bit. For those of you of a faith persuasion, I would just say this, that at the end of the day, grace, G-R-A-C-E, grace to me, is that there's a God who doesn't look at what I do by itself. That God says, why are you there? Why are you in that situation? It's so easy to focus on what's. The law is what's. Grace is why. Grace is how do we become flexible as leaders, as those that care, to give people a shot at life in an environment where one mistake equals death. Give her a round of applause one more time. Thank you for sharing that. I want one more person to share their story, and then the mayor has got someone who's going to share a story as well. One more person who has a story, raise your hand. Because I don't want to, if you have a story you want to share, or you shared at your table, similar to this, someone volunteered back here.
It's actually guacamole and sour cream for the If they would just cut off the guac and sour cream and the little packets of mild sauce, you know, anyways, so, hi, what's your name? This is Stephanie. Give Stephanie a round of applause.
I'm going to try to speak as well as I can with bronchitis. I run a faith-based nonprofit here locally, Be Generous, and we have a house 24-month residential recovery program. I've been working in the community for 13 years. I'm trying bronchitis. I've been working in the community, and I'm on the Walton County Prevention Coalition lead on the Opioid Task Force. Been doing work for about 13 years. 2021, my baby boy Gage, Alan McGough, 22 years old, bought a Percocet in Fort Walton Beach that was laced with fentanyl and passed away. I've lost a handful of spiritual children as well within the last few years, And my 29-year-old is also in recovery, resuscitated him with Narcan 3 times just this past year. So this is an epidemic and it's no respecter of persons. We do have to link arms and hit the ground running. God is good and God is faithful, but we're called to do this work, to co-labor, to see a change. And so one bad day means death, unfortunately. And the Narcan is good right now, but in the training that I've had from Orlando and DC, it's only becoming stronger, and the Narcan eventually is not going to work either. And so we all have to just join efforts in every area, whether it be recovery, mental health, all of it, like you're saying, just coming together.
First of all, thank you for about age. You lost him at 22. Tell us about the age that people wouldn't know. Tell us about the son you lost.
Who he was. Very artistic. Loved theater, drama, art. Went to South Walton High School. Very eccentric in his personality, precious. The most fortunate part of the story is that the Lord did allow him to leave a seed behind, and so I have a grandbaby that's a spitting image of her daddy. She's 5 years old, and that's probably the hardest part. Is her coming just like she did yesterday and saying, Gigi, I want to talk to my daddy. And so all we can do is pray and ask Papa God to show her a sign or to give her a little wink. Jesus. That's one of the hardest parts of it. The babies that are left behind, fatherless and motherless. But if we make a stand today, we actually can change the generations coming. And so I speak to her about how her dad passed, and I'm just hopeful that we make a change now so that her generation doesn't have to deal with this. Amen.
Again, telling these stories, this is all kind of impromptu. Guys, that's the overdose crisis. We could just go all day. I could just stay here all day and have many of you are teary-eyed because your story, the person you know, just like Gage. I asked Stephanie, tell us the Gage that people don't know. He was an artist. He was someone who, he was eccentric. He was a beautiful young man. And a dangerous, poisonous drug, more addictive than anything we've ever seen before, got a hold of him. And one bad day equals him being gone. Guys, this is the crisis. This is the crisis. And it's so easy. I'm going to talk about something just for a second and indulge me. But guys, it's just so easy for us to make a judgment of people who are struggling with drugs. It's just so easy to judge people who make mistakes. It's very easy to say, oh, look at us in here, we're making good choices, but those drug addicted people, they're making bad choices, and this is the consequence. Guys, I gotta tell you, my life experience tells me it's not that simple, man. My life experience tells me that it's good people who make a few wrong choices, just like we did. By the way, thank goodness there wasn't Facebook and Instagram for many of your butts a few years ago. I can't imagine the mayor's Instagram from 1937 or whatever. Just kidding, Mayor. Just kidding. The first lady's giving me an evil eye right now. I can feel it. But guys, imagine if your dirty little secrets and all the mistakes you made define your whole life, right? It's just, guys, it's just so easy to start this conversation on the opioid crisis with judgment and with ideas that are punitive in nature. And I can easily do that. But what I think we got to start with today is that realization that these drugs are unlike anything we've ever seen before. And it's going to take an expansion of our grace, of our understanding, of our compassion to put together policies and treatments and options for folks to give them a fighting chance. Give everyone in the room who shared a story today a round of applause. Just give thank you. Let me talk to you for just a second about what Project Opioid is, because I unfortunately at 2:30 today, I'll be leaving. I have to fly to San Antonio for another meeting, and the mayor's going to conclude the meeting at 2:30. So for any of you that don't see me afterward, my contact information will be up there, and I look forward to connecting with all of you via technology. But Project Opioid is basically the idea of you in this room. It's about bringing a coalition of folks together, government, those in education, law enforcement, healthcare, criminal justice, but combining that with the business community, philanthropy, and faith-based organizations. See, Project Opioid, we have a philosophy, and that is, I love the mayor. He bought me a steak last night. It was really good at his new golf course. It was really good, the steak there. Go there if you haven't been there. But I told the mayor, listen, Mayor, I love government, but government by itself cannot solve this crisis. And I'll tell you, listen, if you're against government funding, I can understand why you are. Because government struggles to implement solutions. At the same time though, government's got resources right now, and government's got the money coming down from these opioid settlements, and government helps run the Department of Children and Families, and so we can't get rid of government. Government's critically important. So what Project Opioid seeks to do is build relationships and coalitions where government and the business, faith community, philanthropy work together and create some healthy tension to look to have real solutions implemented. So that's what we're all about. We do Project Opioid around the state. We do it in other parts of this country. And it's ultimately about business, faith, philanthropy, people like yourselves partnering with everyone else to make a difference. Let's see here. Uh-oh, it's the wrong button, that's why. So we have leaders around the state working on this crisis. We've got some great leaders. The Attorney General is a great partner of ours. Governor DeSantis, very supportive. You're going to hear a little bit about what he's doing. Very, very important. Whatever your politics are, that's all are welcome here. But I would say that because we have a governor who's in a really strong position right now, whatever you're going to do as a community, you probably want to know what he's focused on in this crisis, because there's probably funding that's going to go with what he's focused on. He's got a brand new initiative called CORE. It's an acronym that's, I have no idea what it stands for, but it's something, we'll look at it in just a minute. But we want to know what leaders around the state are focused on, because you can do that here in your community and get funding to do it as well. So here's in a nutshell what we hope you look at doing. Bring together a coalition, and really multiple coalitions. Today is not meant to be the end, It's meant to be the beginning. And what I hope is the mayor and some of the other leaders in this room are going to look to bring together really 4 different groups of people. At the end of, after lunch, we're gonna break you guys into, for 15, 20 minutes, into those groups. Those 4 groups are those that are providing treatment or doing the behavioral health services, or faith-based organizations that are in the recovery community. We're gonna get those people working together a little bit more than maybe they are right now. There's some great coalitions here already, but how do we get people working together more closely who are already on in this fight, number 1. Number 2, we want to get together business leaders and faith leaders who maybe have no connection to this issue, but could be a great new front line in this crisis. Listen, we've got to help people who are before they start struggling. And your company where you work, or your congregation where you worship, can be one of the most important places. Listen, man, hey, faith leader, church leader, pastor, this is the #1 cause of death of your parishioners. This is the if you run a company in here and one of your employees dies, they died by suicide or death by opioid. That is how young people are dying now. Obviously, you know, car accidents happen in time, but opioids now being the #1 cause of death of those in your church or those who you employ. Guys, your church, your congregation, your company can be a new front line. We have ways that we can help you in your company or church prevent people from getting on drugs and help them if they're struggling. We also want to pull together those that want to help educate middle schoolers, high schoolers, college-age kids on the dangers of drugs. Guys, let's keep it real a second. In America, we kind of have had a hypocritical stance on drugs. Like, because we always told people, President Reagan, Nancy, just say no to drugs, right? That's what we told people in the 80s when the sheriff had his mullet and was trying to be Don Johnson, right? Like, we told people, just say no to drugs. Kinda, right? Because then at the same time, we glorified in movies things like Scarface. And oh boy, how many of you and your parents told the stories about being at Woodstock and using drugs? Like, all I'm saying is we kind of have a hypocritical attitude in our society where we tell young people, don't use drugs, but we don't really educate them, and we kind of glorify drugs at the same time. I'm just saying. But guys, now the message for young people needs to be, just say no to drugs. That young lady who overdosed, she thought she was taking a Percocet. She was taking fentanyl. And as law enforcement will tell you, fentanyl is now in every drug on the streets because it's so cheap to make. And so we got to educate young people. The 4th group is the mayor pulling together other elected leaders, decision makers to put together the community strategy. So we want you guys to build these coalitions, look at data, and look at implementing solutions that save lives. You guys heard the numbers, but they're worth saying again. 17,000 Americans died of overdose in the year 2000. Next year at this time, it'll be 117,000. 10,000 Floridians will die of overdose by 2023. That's the projections. And your community, the numbers that we'll show you later that we get from the state, you guys have seen a 92% increase in deaths in 2 years. 92% increase in deaths, and no end in sight. So this is impacting you guys in a way that is absolutely just tragic, and it's not going away right now. As we talked about, I think this is so key. Fentanyl, 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 fentanyl. Often when I'm in a meeting like this, I'll ask someone to tell a story about their recovery, It is so encouraging to hear people talk about being on heroin or being on cocaine, and then they were on it for years, and then they recovered, and now they're working in an organization or giving back to the community. Often when I call people up to give a recovery story, which is so encouraging to hear people tell their story, someone will go through this long story about how many years they used drugs and how many times they went to rehab, and now they're better. And often, at the end of their story, I'll say, "Sir, ma'am, what years did that happen?" "Oh, I got clean and sober in 2011. I struggled for 10 years before that." "Oh, I got clean and sober in 2013. I got clean and sober in 2009. And what I like to point out is, as lovely as those stories are, that person would be dead today. That person, that story is great and does not work in 2023. Thank you for your story. Your 15 relapses would mean you are dead. Gage, 10 years ago, would have had a fighting chance. But in a world of fentanyl, which is 20, 30, 40, 50 times more powerful than the heroin of 10 and 15 years ago, now relapse, one bad day equals death. In some of our meetings, we'll pass out little, that rock salt that you put on all your food. We'll sometimes pass out little baggies with one little grain of rock salt. That's the amount of fentanyl that will get you very high. 2 little grains is a fatal dose. That is how little it takes to kill you. So again, I can't stress enough that what we are focused on at Project Opioid is a fentanyl crisis. And actually, calling it an opioid crisis probably, these are opioids, but really it's a fentanyl crisis now. Fentanyl is what is killing most people who are dying. Look at these pills. These are actual pills the DEA, this is a good Facebook, Instagram post if you're looking for a good moment to pick up your phone. Which one would you have thought was real if I didn't have it underneath there? Guys, the fake one looks more real than the real one. I don't want to take a lot of time to talk about the China and Mexico angle on this, other than to say this. Guys, these pills are not being made in America. The ingredients are all coming from China, and these pills are being made by the Mexican cartels. And there's a big conversation about the southern border. It's very political. It's important, but it's very political. I would just say this to you guys. I think one thing to know about the southern border is there used to be really 3 cartels that were producing all of these drugs. Now those cartels have splintered, and the last report we got from the DEA is there's 50 cartels now who are producing fentanyl. It's a billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar industry, and they know if they produce these fake pills, young people will absolutely take them, put their life at risk, knowing that some of them are real and most of them are fake. So this is what young people are faced with. This is what someone who was on a prescription pill and now their doctor cut them off because the doctor doesn't want to get sued, right? And guys, they're going into withdrawals. This is the choice that they have to make. Read this. 40% of the pills on the streets are lethal. 40%. Our sheriff in Central Florida, Sheriff Dennis Lima, good buddy of mine, he says this: you would be better off taking a 6-shot revolver, putting 1 bullet in it, spinning it, and pulling the trigger. You have better odds doing that than taking a fake pill. It's crazy. So 2 out of 5 pills contain a lethal dose of fentanyl. And so this is the crisis we're seeing right now, and this is what's impacting all of us. This was from a few years ago. Just in 2 years, they saw a 430% rise in the fake pills. And guys, this is nothing now. You know, your law enforcement talking about the amount of fentanyl they're seeing, it's just unbelievable. So, Mayor, I think you have one more story that you wanted someone to share. A couple more stories. We're going to take a minute, talk about a few more stories, and then dive into details. I'm going to talk to you guys in detail today. We're going to have a good lunch. We're going to get to know each other a little bit more. But we're going to talk today about the new state programs that are coming down, that have money attached to them. How can we get more funding for treatment for people in need? Guys, we're going to talk about medications. I know a lot of folks, this is a controversial topic, but there are new FDA-approved medications that we can give folks while they're starting out their treatment that'll keep them from overdosing and dying. I know that puts a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth because they think about methadone and people going every day to take methadone and turning into zombies. And I'm not against methadone, but I know why people would be against trading one drug for another. Guys, I want to talk to you a little bit about newer medications that have become available that don't get you high, do not get you high, and keep you from overdosing. And they give you a second chance. So we're going to talk about those. But we're going to also talk about how the community can navigate those in need to help. The truth be told is, if someone reaches out for help in your community, there's not a lot of help available. And if they don't have insurance, that help goes virtually to zero. Guys, we have to change that because most of the people dying, they wind up in a tough spot where they're uninsured, they've made some mistakes, etc. So we're going to talk about all that in a minute. Mayor, take it away.
All right, first of all, thank you. That's great. And like Andre said, he will rejoin us in a little bit. One of the factors that we sometimes tend to overlook is the impact that drug abuse or overdoses has on not just the user, but on all family members. As difficult as it is, a family member who was impacted by this horror has agreed to share with us this morning his experience. Although I do not personally know this individual, I believe most of us know his connection to a horrific incident that made nationwide headline news just about a year ago. And joining us to share his story is Mr. Jeff Nunn. Jeff, come on up.
I'm Jeff Nunn. I'm originally, I grew up in Fort Walton Beach, joined the military, and like so many military, wound up back here. I've been in Crestview since 2001. I've been a resident here. My family, my mother and 2 sisters and a brother, we all grew up in Fort Walton Beach. This mainly involves my brother's history of his drug abuse. He started out young when he was in his teens. I want to say 16, 17. I was already in the Air Force. Had been away from home about 10 years. He started out then. The first time it happened when he started running out of money to buy his drugs. He would go steal. He would steal from my mother. When that didn't work, he would go and rob a place. He wasn't the smartest criminal. One time he went up with a finger in his pocket and robbed a store. Of course, the court, didn't know that. You've got to take that as a real threat. Fortunately, he was caught at the Fort Walton Beach Police Department. He was a juvenile, so I believe he got out when he was 18. However, you would think he would have learned his lesson, but he didn't. Like so many others, they get addicted to drugs. He just went back to it time and time again. This last time, he was sentenced under the 3 strikes law. He would receive 15 years in prison. I think you have to do 80 or 85% of your time. He was released in November of 2021. My mother was so excited for him to be out because she was his lifeline in prison. She's the one who put money into his account. She's the one who he called to keep in touch with the family. When he was released, he started working in town. He was on probation. He of course come back to live with her. Now, I don't know what had happened in prison the whole time he was there. You know, people change, but as far as we knew, he never had a history of violence that we knew of. My sister had called me up, I think it was January 9th, a little over a year ago. She said, "Have you heard from Mother? Have you talked to her this weekend?" I said, "I spoke to her Friday." She goes, "Well, I haven't been able to get a hold of her." That's very not like my mother. If you call her, if she didn't answer within a certain amount of time, you know, you knew something was wrong. My mother would always call back within a reasonable amount of time. My sister once said, "I'm going to go check on Mom." I said, "Okay," which I did a few months back. I kind of got hold of my mom. She's like, "Oh, I had my phone turned off, I'm sorry." So she went over there to check on my mom, and not too much later, I got a call from my brother-in-law. And he had always been a kidder. He said, "You need to get over here right now." He says, "Your mother's dead." So we got over there as soon as I could. It was all blocked off. You know, the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Department was there. And my brother-in-law said, we saw your mother. He was a volunteer fireman. He says, "Your sister, saw it. I got her out of there as soon as possible." My brother was nowhere to be found, and the vehicle was missing. We described to law enforcement what the vehicle looked like and stuff, and the Fort Walton Police Department was able to apprehend him. It doesn't make sense to me. It will never make sense. He wanted money. She was holding on to his debit card because she knew what he would do with the money. He would use it for drugs. Everything boiled down to drugs. We grew up in a normal, average home. What made him want to keep doing drugs? I don't know. So I wish he would have gotten help sooner. Maybe it would have helped. I don't know. But I want to thank law enforcement that are here. I know some of you probably know this story, and thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Jeff. I know how difficult it is to do something like that. I appreciate that. Our next presenter is an individual very near and dear to me, especially since she was just recently selected as Crestview's Citizen of the Year for the amazing work that she does in addiction prevention and rehabilitation. I have known Dana Claw for a few years now, and seeing how she has grown from someone who helped out the addicted and our homeless population at the Crestview Area Shelter for the Homeless to her present position as president of the Emerald Coast Life Center. She has much to share with us, and I ask you to join me in welcoming Dana to the podium.
Good morning. It's such an honor to be here. I'm not even going to lie, I have a lot of emotions going through my body right now because in 2020, IEUS from Florida Women's Reception Center And this was a dream that I got to live out in Colorado when I was healthy, when I was well. So when I say that, I am a person who is 4 years this July, no substance in this body, no chemical dependency on pharmaceutical opioids. Opioids destroyed my family. I moved here from Colorado in 2014, the beginning of 2015, just coming off a back surgery. I re-injured myself. My daughter and I rode horses. We were both hunter jumpers, and I fell off my horse and re-injured my back. We were new to the community, or back to the community. I grew up in Crestview, Florida. I graduated of Crestview High School. I'm forever a Bulldog, class of '89. With that, coming back, we went through a flash flood. A lot of trauma happened. So what's important to me to bring out in this opioid summit, spending time in the justice system. I have 20 years of working on a reservation in Colorado with my people, American Indian, indigenous culture, working with tribal courts, Wellness to Healing Court, working with judges, and been doing it for 20 years. Opioids do not discriminate. They don't leave Christians alone. They don't leave people who are walking away from anything alone. They come into our families as well. So it's important that we, as the Emerald Coast Life Center, bring to our community. If I can say one thing, I'm not going to get up and do stats and tell horror stories. All I can say is that my life was affected. Now I get to go back to the streets of Crestview, Florida, and I get to give back. I get to go into places that most people cannot get into. I get to go to trap houses. I get to leave Narcan. I get to educate on harm reduction. People may say, well, Dana, you've never had any police involvement. Prior to this situation, how does one get involved? In Florida, our pain management clinics, we have got to do some education. We have got to teach, whether it's yoga, whether it's meditation, essential oils, something other than writing a prescription. I was somebody who beat in my life, 43 years plus, not even using any substance at all. Having an LLC in Colorado, the Life Center in Colorado, which now we have the Emerald Coast Life Center in Florida, where we get to go educate. Spring break's coming. Guess what Emerald Coast Life Center is doing? We're gearing up to go to the beaches and be able to hand out Narcan and be able to hand out Never Use Alone business cards. There's a hotline that I'm a part of, and it's a national hotline number, and as they're going to use, we get to be on that phone line, and we get to get their name, their location, and if there should be an overdose, that we can get EMS dispatched to them to save that life. We have to break the stigma of, well, just let these junkies die. No, that's a life. That's a life that's important. We don't know if that life, this is me, is going to be the next director of a nonprofit organization changing her community one life at a time. I get to go to the streets, sometimes with law enforcement. You know, it's fun that once I was being investigated, and now I get to ride in the cars with them, and I get to talk about high-risk areas. I get to speak into the life. You know, I never had one officer, and you can look at my criminal report, I had zero. No, I was not even pulled over a speeding ticket at 45 years of age. So how does somebody at 45 years of age end up incarcerated? We have to be open. Churches, if you're a pastor in this room, if you're a lay leader in this room, can I be really, really bold with you guys right now and say, churches, we have to wake up, because I went to my church pastor and I asked for help. My husband, who is in this room, works for a mental health organization, and I went to them and I was denied services because he worked with that organization. So I said to this woman, I said, so if I understand you correctly, you want to use my husband to death, and you want your families to thrive, and you want my family to totally fall apart? My head cannot to this day wrap around that. So as I sat on the inside of Okaloosa County Detention Center, my bunky's in the room. Can you stand up? She's got her hand up back there. I love you. I sat on the inside and God told me, Dana, you got to go through this. They were talking about 3 years of community control for me. I already saw what the justice system did to me. I didn't have a ride. We went through a flash flood. We about lost everything, and on top of trauma, on top of trauma. I had 6 traumas in 4 months. A suicide attempt because I didn't want to be on opioids. All I wanted was help, and I didn't have health insurance. Obamacare. My husband made $12 a year, too much to afford any of healthcare that we could afford. Let me talk about another subject that we just like to turn our heads, and people say, oh, well, that's not going on in Crestview. Well, I beg to differ with you, but there is trafficking going on in Crestview. And you know, sometimes when you're affiliated or you understand the street life and trap houses, you know, sometimes you're going to get caught up in that they're going to use you for trafficking, labor trafficking. You're going to be the one they force to go steal. You're going to be the one they force to go get whatever and go pawn it. Well, I'm going to tell your probation officer if you don't go do this. Parts of me were naive. I was born in Chicago. That's why I'm wearing my shirt, Chicago. That's what the streets know me by in Crestview. And you don't understand when you're on these streets, you are forced and manipulated into doing so many things that are not your character, your morals, and your values because the healthcare system failed. I couldn't get health insurance. Mental health hugely failed me. Churches, we have got to become informed on mental health. Liberty University, the Association of Christian Counselors, has a free course right now, $2,500. You get to do it for free to be a mental health coach. Get a team at your church on board. Just because we don't know the answer or it looks a little bit messy, we can't turn people away. I was a voice that should have never been ignored. Law enforcement, I love you, and look at who we're dealing with. We're not just a person who's choosing to do this. We don't know what happened to why that person is on the streets. Nobody ever looked at me and said, Dana, are you safe? Are you being trafficked? Not just sexual traffic. There's labor trafficking, and there's all sorts of other trafficking. There's three types of trafficking. Why do I go back into these areas? Because I was a voice that was forgotten. I was a voice when I asked, I was turned away and I wasn't heard. And that rejection that I live with to this day, I have to recover from post-traumatic stress disorder because I should have never fallen through the cracks. And this is how life even became so bad. You know, suicide. We don't want to live like this. Most of the people I work with on the streets, they don't want this lifestyle. They want help, but where are the resources? Guys, we have to take off our badges, our name tags, our titles, our organization names. And it's time for us to lock arms and run. One city, one mission. It's not about me getting recognition, it's not about you getting recognition, it's about him getting all the recognition. And we've got a partner. We as recovery peer support specialists are becoming a threat to mental health field. Why? Because my life, I can relate to that person on the street. I can relate to their trauma. And it's not fun to live with stigma. You know, when I was on the inside of Florida Women's Reception Center, one of the guards, as you're not supposed to get close, you're not supposed to talk to them, but we do life together. They're going to ask questions eventually. And they said, Dana, you'll never return to that life you had in Colorado. I said, I beg to differ with you. You don't know this girl from Chicago. 2020, I got out, EOS, end of sentence, hold P62849. That's me, Citizen of the Year. I was so shocked. We have to break the stigma. We have to be team players. We have to recognize when somebody has a gifting and a talent, because I know I don't have it all. There's sometimes I need to reach out to other people and say, hey, come run with me. I need your support. I need your help. Recovery peer support specialist, that's a word that our community is going to hear. We, the Emerald Coast Life Center, we're trying to develop an ecosystem in our community, a system, a recovery-oriented system of care. We're guided, and Department of Children and Families is speaking into our organization, our business. We get to help people develop a wellness recovery action plan. My heartbeat, I will be inside Okaloosa Detention Center. I'm not giving up. I did time there, and I'm going to go back and give back and love on people who need to know that they can recover from their trauma, their hurts, their habits, their hang-ups, their life-controlling issues. It's time to take back our community. Loving one person at a time, getting in the trenches with them, and getting them connected to all these systems of care that are in this room right now. I just want to say thank you to our mayor. We have the most amazing mayor who is behind us in getting this word out. In 2020, I got to meet Andre on Zoom. We were doing a lot of Zooms. It was COVID, so I've been running with him since 2020. I'm piecing my face with him now, but I know who he is. So anyway, we're going to do amazing things in Crestview, Florida. The Emerald Coast Life Center is here with the determination to continue doing what we do best. And that's taking lives and putting them on the right path of wellness and recovery. Thank you so much.
Yeah. What can I say? Mr. Bailey, would you like to come back up now, please? Thank you.
Everybody stand up. Stretch your arms, go side to side. Give someone a high five, shake a hand, say hello to someone. Do a yoga pose if you're all right, sit back down now. That's fine. We're going to talk for about 10 more minutes, and then we're going to get some lunch and talk at our tables. I believe we're almost halfway done with this summit, and I think hearing from folks like Dana, I think there's kind of a theme when you listen to Dana and some of the other folks in the room. I just had a chance to meet Wesley. Wes, how's it going, man? Good. Wes runs a treatment facility. I'll call it that. He'd probably call it something else, but a treatment facility where he has, I just met him, but he has like 100 individuals at any given day staying with him for 6 months. Figuring out how to put their life back together. You know, guys, underneath this addiction crisis, it's so important I say this to you. You know, we got to keep people alive. We got to have Narcan. Some of you, you're going to have to change your beliefs on medication. I'm telling you right now, I'm a conservative. I'm a Christian. I had to change my thinking when it comes to some of these folks who need medication, especially when they're getting off of these drugs. We're gonna need to stretch our thinking. You're gonna hear that from me over and over again. But I'll tell you, for all of us, one of the things we can take from Wesley or Dana or Stephanie, who I met, who runs a great organization here, is behind all the people who are struggling with drugs is a story of trauma, abuse, neglect. Guys, people turn to drugs for a reason. I'm just telling you, for some of us who have been away from the streets for a while, or you've been fortunate, you've been blessed, right? You've never known people who live on the wrong side of the tracks, if you will. I'll just tell you, one of the things I take away from Dana's story is just to have compassion for people who are struggling, because you never know what they have been through in their life, man. You never know what someone has experienced in their life that puts them in a position where they would knowingly risk their whole life to take a drug to make them feel better. Hey, listen, if you, I'm gonna say this to you and I'm gonna move on from this topic, I promise you. Some of the folks who are doing opioids or meth or fentanyl right now, they don't want help from you. They don't want help from you. They don't want to hear about an overdose summit. Do you know why? Because a lot of those folks would tell you they were abused as children, they were sexually violated, they were in the foster care system, they never knew a father or mother, that they were beaten, they were homeless, and they would tell you that opioids or drugs is the first time in their life they ever felt right. They would tell you that their life experience was so terrible that drugs, even if it could mean death, is better for the moment because of what they experienced. And I just say that to you because it's good to remember in the middle of this drug crisis that broken people who are hurting often are turning to drugs, and they're not really just looking for a solution from a drug. They're looking for love and hope and restoration and a future. And without remembering that, it's very easy to dismiss them. And I pray every day that I don't allow good times to make me harsh to those that don't have good times. Does that make sense? So we're going to go eat in just a minute. But I'm going to show you a few more things, and then when we're going to eat, we're going to talk at our tables. How many of you have seen Breaking Bad? Walter White, Breaking Bad. All right, so you see Breaking Bad, there's this teacher, and he's got cancer, so he decides to become a meth, to create meth, and I've seen enough of the episodes to remember parts of it. There's this cartel that approaches him, and they have this beautiful laboratory they make for him with all these wonderful machines. It looks like, you know, a place where they would make, you know, Pepsi or Coca-Cola. It's a beautiful warehouse, and he's gonna make meth there. And eventually, it doesn't really work out well for him. This is how fentanyl is really made. We might think about these Chinese laboratories and Mexican laboratories like Breaking Bad or like Miami Vice. Guys, this is actual footage of teenagers making fentanyl in the woods of Mexico. Yep, those are cooking vats. That's what you make soup in. They've got lots of guns. They've got the ingredients from China. This is them making fentanyl. Show it to you one more time. So, when we start thinking about, well, why are some of the pills filled with dangerous amounts of fentanyl? Guys, this is the quality control process right here. By the way, a lot of these teenagers die making this because it's so powerful. So, the way that this drug is being created by the Mexican cartels, pressed into these fake pills, this is the origin process to how they're making it. So I just want you guys to get your head around the fact that the drugs that are winding up on our streets, there is no way to know what's in these pills. And this is why it's so much more dangerous, the fentanyl crisis, than the oxycodone crisis. Guys, at least if you were addicted to Oxy, you were getting it from a pharmacy and you knew what you were taking. I'm not saying that's a good thing, right? But you could be taking a pill that has 20% potency of fentanyl or 2,000%. You don't know. So this is how fentanyl is made, and that's why it is as deadly as it is. I'm going to show you this. Well, I'm going to skip ahead and wait for this because so here's a few things I'm going to talk about. We're going to go to lunch really quickly. What does success look like, guys? We have got to learn how to talk to young people about drugs in a rational, non-insane way. So here are the two extremes when it comes to talking about drugs. Number one extreme, don't use drugs. Why, Mom and Dad? Because I told you so, and if you use drugs, Jesus will hate you. So that and no other explanation, and no nuance. Just don't use drugs because I said so. Okay, so that's one extreme, and I would say there's some holes in that version of explaining drugs to young people. The other extreme is pretending like it's going to just be okay. And drugs are just out there, and experimentation is a part of life. We need to start to educate our young people. Part of this success we would see is this community underneath the leaders in this room really looking middle school, high school, college-age kids talking about drugs in a new way. Guys, listen. People might be struggling with mental health issues, they might be depressed, they might have anxiety, but nobody wants to really die, man. People aren't trying to die. So one of the things we encourage you to do is look at deeper conversations, churches, companies, schools, about these pills, about fentanyl. When we go out and we survey high school and college age kids, they don't know anything about this crisis. They don't know that drugs that they are around every day could have fentanyl in them. So one of the things we're going to encourage you to do is talk more about advocacy and education. We have a campaign called the Everyone Campaign that we give to any community who wants to use it. You guys might have your own campaign. The governor and the attorney general have the One Pill Can Kill campaign, great campaign. So talking about advocacy. This is a slide for companies. This might not make a whole lot of sense to those of you that don't run your own business, but there's a big impact we can have through human resources and training programs inside of companies, impacting the opioid crisis, educating people in the workforce. As we go into lunch, the second thing we're going to talk about on the flip side of lunch, guys, if right now your cell phone rings or there's a text and it's a friend of yours, a family member, a kid related to a friend of yours who knows that you're at this overdose summit and they're like, my kid needs help, where are you going to send them? What help is really available for people who reach out? What we want to help you work with, and the mayor is going to talk about starting today, how do we start working together, having community goals, getting money from Tallahassee and the federal government and other places, and look at creating navigation for people who are struggling. If someone is struggling and they fall through the cracks and die in your community, guys, that's unacceptable. It is unacceptable that someone falls through the cracks and dies. But we can make it different in this community. This is very kind of, this reads like an eye chart, but there's ways that we want to talk about after lunch and during lunch. Everyone working together with those who are struggling in the middle. And again, this is what the Governor DeSantis is looking at as well. How do we navigate? At the end of the day, doesn't it really come down to, if people get help in the community who are struggling, then this is a community that takes this seriously. If people right now don't get any help in your community, guys, this is all a big waste of time and a bunch of hot air. So how do we make sure people get help no matter where they are in the community? 5-10 years ago, you could be in a journey with addiction where you relapse, even on cocaine, heroin, prescription pills, and you could get away with it, meaning you could live to tell your tale. Now, in a world with fentanyl as the drug in every pill, guys, there's a Vice News special on YouTube that you guys should Google that shows Vice News went to Mexico to these farms in Mexico where these migrant farmers for 3 generations have been growing the opium poppy, the plant that for thousands of years we've grown the opium poppy plant, and out of it we produced opium. When they found King Tutankhamun, remember King Tut? King Tut was buried with opium from an opium plant. So even back then they were using opium from that plant. If you go in this Vice News story and look at in Mexico where they've been growing the opium poppy for 50 years, it now sits and rots unpicked in a lot of these fields because the drug cartels don't want it and don't need it anymore. There really is very little real opioids left in this country. Cocaine, heroin, real cocaine, real heroin are really becoming very scarce. All these drugs are now fentanyl. All of it's fentanyl because it's dirt cheap. And that, officer, tell me your name again. Officer Robert, he said they found 91 grams of fentanyl. All right, so the 91 grams of fentanyl that he found, I'm not an expert, I think he's the expert, but I would tell you a drug dealer could make a small fortune off of 91 grams of fentanyl if they cut it into, it's just incredibly profitable, fentanyl, and this is why, in my opinion, you're going to see more and more fentanyl. It's not going to go away. And so when people now do drugs and they relapse, they're finding fentanyl and they're dying. Someone else, one other thought, something that stands out to you that we've heard so far today. Renee, say that on the mic.
Take more than 1 dose of Narcan.
The young lady in the video, 4 doses of Narcan to bring her back. 4 doses. So Ed also made a point. He came and found me. He asked me a question. He cornered me like half of you did during the break. He asked me the question that he really wanted to ask me, right? So Ed came to me and said, Andre, I have a question for you. I'm paraphrasing here, but why, with all these dangerous drugs out there, why are young people doing this to themselves? Any of you ask that question? Any of you saying to yourself, like, they see their friends dying, they see, why are young people doing this to themselves? So this is not part of the presentation, but I do want to address this for just a second. Guys, we have an opioid crisis that's turned into a fentanyl crisis. We've been talking about it for a few hours now, and it really makes drug use more dangerous than anything we've ever seen before, and it makes it a zero-sum game. Like, whatever reason you mess with drugs, you're screwed and gonna die. Like, does that make sense? So it doesn't, in a sense, doesn't matter why people are struggling. When they take these drugs, they become addicted and they die, right? But that asks a kind of a good question, right? He says, listen, like many of us who are older, it seems like young people, how many of you got like a kid or a grandkid or something, and you just look at them and you're like, man, these kids are crazy. That's not a scientific term, but I would just say, I have 2 daughters, 21 and 22, and I'm just like, they are from another planet. What planet are you from that you think that's how life works? And this is the root of Ed's question. Every generation thinks they're different, right, than the previous generations. It certainly seems that teenagers and those in their 20s and early 30s are different in a way that is like something we've never seen before. I want to address that for just 1 second and tell you my opinion on it. Let me give you a couple stats first, and then I'm just going to give you my opinion. So here's what the stats say, guys. Anxiety, depression, suicide, drug use, you name it, no generation has ever struggled with those more than 30-somethings, 20-somethings, and teenagers right now. Guys, we're seeing historic mental health, behavioral health issues with millennials and Gen Z. And guys, I don't want to get off on this too much because you're all gonna become conspiracy theorists and start, heading to your prepper ranch on the other side of Crestview, which I'll join you there shortly. But I do want to say this to you. No matter what your opinion is on COVID and the vaccine and all that nonsense, let me just say this. When we shut down society for 2 years, it devastated our young people. We do not have enough of no, listen. I'm not saying we should, all of you take your CNN and Fox News brains and put them aside for a second and listen to them. All I'm here to tell you is this. In hindsight's always 20/20. I'm not saying what we should or shouldn't have done, right? What I'm telling you though is, when you took your middle schoolers and your high schoolers and your college-age kids and you locked their butts away for 2 years, away from their friends, didn't let them go to school, didn't let them play sports, didn't let them be around other people for 2 years, it messed them up, guys. It just did, right? So that's not a political statement. I'm telling you, 5 and 10 and 20 years from now, we're gonna see more mental health issues among young people than we've ever seen before. Number one, because a world filled with, to directly address Ed's question, I think we have to be cognizant of the fact that a world filled with social media and technology and a culture that exists today, it wasn't like this in the 80s, it wasn't like this in the 50s, in the 90s. So I say all that just to tell you, I don't think there's a really clear answer on why, Ed, but I think everyone in here who knows a 20-something, who knows a teenager, who knows someone in their 30s, you should start with the idea that even if they don't say it, even if they don't talk about it, they are struggling with mental health issues in a way that's different than we did. They live in a world that's more complicated than the one, guys, I'm 46 years old, and I think about being a 20-year-old young guy today, and I'm like, I don't know, man, I don't know if I'd want that. It seems like the world I grew up in just 20 years ago was so much more simple than this kind of scary world today. I say all that just to tell you, I think our young people need a little grace. They need some older folks like us to be open-minded and have an open heart towards their struggles. And I think it's important for us to be willing to look at them a little differently than we look at ourselves. And so just to Ed's question, I don't have the exact answer, but if you have a 20 or 30 something in your life, a teenager in your life, I think they're struggling, and I think we as a society ignore that to our own demise. I'll bring him up again. Wes, who's in the back, said to me, he runs a behavioral health center. He said, Andre, the truth is, there are people in this room today who, if they were to tell the truth, are struggling with anxiety and depression and committing and considering ending their own life in this room. Guys, this is the world we live in today, and I just would tell you, we don't have all the answers, but you know what is an answer? Grace and compassion and love and understanding and coming together to do something meaningful for those who are struggling. These are the ideas that made us at one time a great country and a great society. And this is at the heart of what we can do about this crisis. Amen? So I knew I'd get an amen there. So, all right, let's get back into it for just a minute. We're gonna not keep you guys too much longer. Here are 5 things you need to know about the crisis. Feel free to take photos of these, put them online, send them to your friend, and be like, I told you so. You know, someone who disagrees with you, use them to like argue on Twitter. You know, it's just great. You know, like that's what these slides are for. But 5 things you need to know, and then 5 things you need to do about this crisis. We're going to go through this. We're then going to break up into groups, and then the mayor is going to tell you a little bit more about his plan to partner with some of you to make sure there's more help available. So number 1, 5 things Project Opioid. Things you need to know. Number 1, everyone say fentanyl. Fentanyl. Everyone say fentanyl. Fentanyl is driving this crisis. I think we covered that at great length today. And by the way, for those of you that shared your stories about losing loved ones, thank you for sharing those stories. And I would say in almost every occurrence where someone died in the past few years, it's very rare to find someone who died that wasn't of fentanyl. So fentanyl is now driving this crisis. It is the most dangerous drug we've ever seen. We've covered this. You can't understand this crisis without understanding fentanyl. What fentanyl does to your brain, it's a weapon of mass destruction, guys. We have to think differently about drugs when you think about fentanyl. I have a doctor friend, Dr. Aaron Wall, who's an MD, addiction pain specialist. He was with a judge, and not a philosophical judge, a literal judge, from a part of the state, a little bit south of here. And that judge was saying, people need to just choose better, they need to get off drugs by making a choice, and you know, great, the choice is important. But Dr. Wall explained to this judge what happens to your brain when it's on drugs. Remember the commercial with the egg? This is your brain on drugs. So it's not exactly that. Let me give you Dr. Aaron Wall's version of your brain on fentanyl. He's sitting with this judge and he says, Judge, do you have a swimming pool? And the judge says, I do. They were in Palm Beach, of course the judge had a swimming pool. He says, okay, we're gonna leave this meeting, much like we're here today, and we're gonna go to your house right now where your swimming pool is. And you and I are gonna get in your swimming pool, Judge. And what we're gonna do is you are gonna go under the water and you're gonna count to 60. 60 seconds underwater. By the way, he could probably do it with a little practice. At 60 seconds, at a maximum, something very fascinating is going to happen to you. You are going to begin to run out of oxygen in a traditional sense, and you are going to physically respond and try to come up. And at the moment you try to come up, I'm going to hold you down. When you, at second 61, Judge, when you're done holding your breath and you try to come up for air, I'm strong and I'm going to hold you under that water. I will not let you come up. At that moment, a part of your brain is going to kick in your mammalian lizard brain. That's the part that feels like it's dying and helps you survive in a life or death situation. And that part of your brain, while I'm holding you underwater, 65 seconds, 70 seconds, 75 seconds. That part of your brain, when it kicks on, I don't care if you're the elected judge of your community or the Queen of France, you will kick me, punch me, you would shoot me with a gun, Judge, to get out of my clutches as I'm holding you under that water. That part of your brain would do anything to survive at that moment. We're going to go play this out, Judge. And Judge, that is what happens when someone is withdrawing from fentanyl. It's the exact same part of their brain, and whether it's true or not, it is the feeling of death. And as they're withdrawing, that part of their brain kicks in, and they would do anything to get the next dose of the drug. As hard as that is to comprehend, guys, is it as simple as choice? And this is so important, guys, again, because we got some real, and I say this you're my family. Well, we got people of faith in here. We have conservative people. We have, like, guys, the biggest challenge you guys have sometimes when you're people of faith, and the biggest challenge I have sometimes, is pretending that our circumstances and other people's circumstances are always the same, guys. Like, I'm telling you right now, when people are addicted to this drug, I had a mom call me a couple weeks ago telling me about her son who's addicted to fentanyl. He was in Stanford University 5 years ago. Stanford University. He had just gotten out of the Seminole County Sheriff's Office. He had been incarcerated for the 7th time, overdosed twice in the month of December. He was in Stanford. He was, you know the GPA you have to get into Stanford? I said, ma'am, I just want you to know, your son right now is gone. What's replacing him is someone who has this in their brain, and until we get this out of his brain, he doesn't have a fighting chance. So fentanyl is what is leading this crisis. And if we don't understand that, guys, we'll put our old judgments. I don't care if your friend kicked alcohol and you're gonna now tell your fentanyl addicted friend to take the same ideas. There are truths there that are important, but fentanyl has to be looked at differently. And as a community, we're gonna talk about the governor's plan that I think does address some of this. Number 2, and this goes to Ed's question, this is killing young people in record numbers. We've just never seen a crisis where as many young people are dying as we're seeing right now. Tell me your name again.
I'm Chloe Cox.
Chloe Cox. What grade are you in?
I'm in 6th grade.
Everyone say hello, Chloe. Hello. I think Chloe's our youngest member in attendance here. So Chloe's in middle school. What middle school do you go to?
I'm actually homeschooled.
She's in homeschool because her mom's protecting her. Good mom, so. She's in middle school though. Did you guys know that the overdose death rate in Florida among middle schoolers doubled in 1 year last year? Her. Does she look like a junkie, guys? Does she look like someone who needs to just make better choices? Guys, come on, can we keep it real a second? Her friends are dying and they're getting pills that they don't even know what's in it. Guys, this is killing young people because of how powerful these drugs are. This is important. I'm gonna bear down in a second. Do not raise your hand. Do not raise your hand. Do not raise your hand. How many of your butts took drugs when you were younger and experimented? Do not raise your hands. So filled with judgment, a lot of us. But we were in a different playing field, guys. It was different. There wasn't fentanyl in everything. The drugs were different. I'm begging you, think about what our young people are facing today. It's different, it's different, it's different. This crisis is killing young people in record numbers. This is the one you definitely want to take a photo of. This is your county. The death rate didn't go up by 93% for 20 years. And then it doubled in 2 years. There's something, a good friend of mine is a healthcare attorney from California who wrote the book, The United States of Opioids. His name is Harry Nelson. It's a great book that talks about the history of drugs, opioids in our country. He and I used to talk a couple years ago about something we call the opioid singularity. So in science, the singularity is this concept. By the way, who knows what the singularity is? Who knows Ray Kurzweil? All right, I'm gonna give this guy a prize afterward. So Ray Kurzweil wrote this book about the idea of the singularity, which I'm not gonna say this right, is basically that technology is advancing so quickly that there's a point in the future where we don't even know what the world will look like. Like the calculator runs out of math telling us what the future looks like. So there's this moment on the map, the chronological map, 2040, 2050, it changes, where technology is advancing so fast, we don't know even what our life will look like, good or bad. We talked about the fact that, guys, we have millions of Americans, millions, thousands here in this community who take prescription opioids right now. Thousands. Then don't raise your hands, people in this room. You're on Oxycontin, you're on Percocet. Guys, my own mother, because of her rheumatoid arthritis, taking Percocet for years from her doctor. She starts telling me a few months ago, her doctor doesn't want to give it to her anymore. Because these lawsuits, right, they're making everyone nervous. The opioid singularity is this conversation this attorney and I had about what happens when we start cutting off 25, 35 million Americans who are on opioids, on prescription opioids, all at the same time while fentanyl is coming in. I'm just telling you, we think we've reached the peak of this crisis, but it's scary to think where we could wind up. But this is your community in the last 2 years, 92%.
I have a question. That percentage of death percentage, what about the percentage of emergency responses? Do you have that?
So here, she's asking, what is the emergency response, the Narcan distributions, I would say a good national statistic, because I don't have that data here, and I don't think we keep good records on that at the state level. A good number that we've used nationally is for every one person who dies, there's at least 10, maybe 20 who have been brought back and live. Like, so you're talking about it, and again, law enforcement was here earlier saying they're resuscitating someone with Narcan every day. Sometimes, Mayor, we heard yesterday they're deploying Narcan just in the city multiple times a week. So it's really, yes, guys, 100,000 people died in America, and I bet you that number would be 500,000 without Narcan. Just run the math. It's very simple. So this is your community, and the numbers are crazy. All right, this is where I'm going to duck under the tables while objects begin to be thrown at me. Stephanie and Wes will still love me at the end of this presentation, I promise you. Here's the deal, guys. Here's the deal. We have to think about the treatment we're offering, not people who are struggling with alcohol, not people who are struggling with all mental health issues in general. We have to rethink what it means to ask someone who's taking fentanyl, who's been addicted to it, who's trying to get better. We have to think about models where we do not give them harm reduction strategies. That's a very weighted statement, by the way. To a lot of people, harm reduction is fentanyl, testing strips, and clean needles, and safe injection sites. In my opinion, those are not things that are probably going to come to your community or to the state of Florida, most of them. I'm simply talking about this. When someone is struggling with fentanyl and they go into a treatment center or they're trying to get better, we have medications, a lot of which don't get you high, don't make you altered, that give you the ability to get your brain back so you can fight for yourself, and they don't let you go to Taco Bell, have a burrito supreme, and freaking die. Guys, you can't overdose one time and die and that be acceptable here. I'm sorry. I don't care what other argument you have to make. People who overdose because they relapse, they die now. Unlike what it was 5 years ago before fentanyl was in every drug. So fentanyl is driving overdose deaths in a way that are different than they were before. I'm going to talk to you about Governor DeSantis' CORE program. This is very important. I'm going to talk about this in just a minute. But the CORE program basically asks for your community, when someone is struggling with opioids, to offer them FDA-approved medications. Now, all my anti-vaxxers who hate the FDA, put that aside a little bit. Put it aside. I'm not trying to defend all things FDA here today. But I am telling you this, that there are newer forms of medication. How many of you know what methadone is? Methadone, by the way, is terrible. I just want you to know. If you have a loved one who's been on methadone, I'm not going to judge that. I'm not going to say, don't do that, because I know some people, that's kept them alive, right? But there are newer drugs. One drug in particular called Sublocade. Now don't necessarily worry about that. But let me tell you what Sublocade is. Sublocade is a drug called buprenorphine. How many of you knew you were going to science class today, right? But this is what you need to know. This is what you need to know, guys. This is what you need to know. When you take fentanyl, do you know how you die when you overdose? Do you actually know the science of death by overdose? Fentanyl goes onto the receptors in your brain, and it basically calms those receptors, this is layman's terms, to the place where the receptors stop firing and they stop telling your body to breathe. So your breath slows, breathing actually eventually stops, and you actually suffocate to death before you go into cardiac arrest. Because your receptors in your brain are overtaken by the poison fentanyl, and it stops those receptors from telling you to breathe. Do you know what happens when you take Narcan or naloxone? This is more powerful on those receptors than fentanyl. It knocks those fentanyl elements off the receptors in your brain, and suddenly your brain doesn't have the fentanyl on the receptors, and you begin to breathe again. So you can see the science behind Narcan is all about helping someone in their brain not die based on the science of opioids. These drugs I'm talking about, these FDA-approved drugs, they act as an antidote, both short-term and long-term. I was in a clinic. Mayor, this is the part where I remind them that I can read the Bible in Greek and Hebrew and that I'm a lifelong conservative. And the reason I say that, guys, is stay with me here. As easy as it is for us to tell people to just suck it up, buttercup, and make better choices, I'm here to tell you, we as conservatives need to evolve in our thinking if we want to keep people alive. Because dead people don't recover, and they don't go to church, and they don't go to rehab. They're dead, and they don't get another chance. All right, thank you. So watch, guys. This drug, Sublocade, just got FDA approval 3 years ago. If you go to a doctor, it's a once-a-month injection in your stomach. And if you try to take drugs, opioids, after taking it, they don't work anymore for 1 month. You can't get high. A guy told me he and his friends, he got this injection of Sublocade. He and his friends went to a party. 4 of them did cocaine. 3 of them dropped dead, and he stood there alive. Didn't work. Guys, we gotta learn, we gotta be open to the idea that there are new medications that can keep people alive while we get them treatment, while we help them sort out their behavioral health issues, while we help them overcome anxiety, depression, PTSD. We are not here to say that people don't need therapy, treatment, rehab, all of those things. But dead people don't get a chance to go to rehab, guys. And so we are fighting and pushing for new resources that are going to be targeting the expansion of treatment with an emphasis on new medications This is Governor DeSantis. I encourage all of you to put Governor DeSantis and core opioids, C-O-R-E, in Google. This is important because, again, all politics aside, if you are a Democrat, you are welcome in this room. If you're a Republican, you're welcome in this room. But in Florida, I would say we pray and ask God for his blessing on everything we do. And by God, I mean Governor DeSantis. I'm kidding. I would say this though, politically speaking, I think you guys would agree that when he makes a decision in this state, it's you might want to move to Alaska if you're going to go against him at this moment. I'm not advocating for that or any political party. I'm just telling you, he seems to have a lot of power in this state right now, right? Can we just agree with that? So he's made a proclamation in September about the path he wants to go down with opioid treatment and the money that we're getting from these lawsuits. And it is this core program that looks to navigate. I'm going to send this to you, Mayor, and let you send this to everyone. But this is the core program. This is the actual brochure from the governor. And this is him talking about, if you see, oh, look at that. I got a red pointer. He's talking here about those that are overdosing. And what he wants to do with this program is have the community come together at the emergency response, emergency rooms, in jails, and navigate people, bypass other hospitals. So he's saying cut out anyone who's not going to do this program, and transport people and get them connected to specialty services. I want you to see, what does that say right there? STAR, medication assisted treatment. Uh-oh. So just letting you guys know, the governor, the attorney general, and others have decided that we need to help keep people alive who are on opioids with medication-assisted treatment. I know that's a lot. Guys, for some of you, I know this is a new conversation. Me and Ed are like, these young people just need to get their junk together and make better choices. And a lot of you, if you're honest, you think those same things, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with it, meaning it's a common way to think. But the governor and your mayor and your Department of Health who's here and Project Opioid and are here to say that we have to work to get behavioral health therapy that starts with medication-assisted treatment. And this is what the governor is proposing, and we fully support it. By this time next year, phase 1 is 12 counties. Okaloosa is not one of them, but next year it will be. So the governor, most likely in this legislative session, will put a lot of money towards navigating people to treatment, but he will mandate that that treatment have some component of medication so that people don't die when they relapse. And I know this is, again, a lot for some of you to process, but we're going to work on it together. I can tell you this. I just want to say this one more time. A lot of folks who have worked with those who are in recovery a long time, the experience with some of these older medications, I get why they hate them. Because some of these older drugs, they keep you alive, but your life isn't really, you're not free. You're not free from addiction, right? I get it. I get why people hate methadone. I'm telling you, some of the newer drugs are different and give you the protection without making you addicted to them. That's my opinion. And that's the opinion of your governor. So we're going to work together. What we hope to see is that the mayor, the Department of Health, your hospitals, your law enforcement, all your recovery partners, they're going to begin to work together to think about this a little bit differently. Imagine every person in your community is represented somewhere in here. We are saying, put together a strategy In the middle here, you have people who are overdosing and potentially dying. Out here, you've got middle schoolers who don't know anything about drugs. You guys need a strategy that thinks about every person. And by the way, maybe it thinks of folks who have mental health issues, behavioral health issues, but they're not using opioids yet. It's incredibly important that we find funding for our treatment centers, for our faith-based partners who are working with those with mental health issues. We need to strive to have a full continuum, and together we can make sure that if someone's struggling with drugs, we have them on a pathway out of trouble, but if someone's not on drugs, we can educate them and keep them safe at the same time. So I show you this, but this is kind of where we feel like we need to go, and something you guys need to consider. The fifth thing you need to know is you can work together to solve this crisis. Guys, you can and you must. We cannot continue to lose as many young people as we are right now. The people in this room can solve this crisis. Point at the person next to you and point at someone next to you and say, "You're the answer." No, that wasn't loud enough. Point to the other person. You don't, whoever you point at you, they don't believe in you. That was not loud enough. Point at someone else then and say, "You're the answer." Guys, together we can solve this crisis. So those are the 5 things you need to know. Again, you can work together to solve this crisis, and Project Opioid is here to help you. So thankful that your mayor asked us to come in. It's our honor to be here. Now quickly, this is similar, but these are 5 things. Now the 5 things you need to know. Here are the 5 things you need to do. And let me add to this a 6th thing before I even start. There are tremendous partners in this room who are running behavioral health centers, faith-based treatment programs, the work that Dana is doing. Dana, did you leave or are you still here? All right, Dana's still here. So Dana is a trip, man. I love Dana. I just let Dana talk for about 3 hours and we'd be all entertained and enlightened, right? But guys, there are good people in this room who are running treatment centers and faith-based organizations and recovery houses, and they are all broke and tired and weary, and they need your support. So if you are working in the treatment field right now, anywhere in this room, stand up. Give them a round of applause. So let me just stay standing. Let me just say this. Step 1, guys, support these folks. Get involved with their organizations. Help them fundraise. Help them get some of this money that's coming down from the state and the federal government. The programs they're doing are essential, and without them, we can't go forward. So everyone agree? Take a look back here. Everyone agree you're going to support these folks? All right, one more round of applause. Thank you, guys. And by the way, I have incredible respect for people that do this. By the way, if you're in here and you just showed up today and you don't do anything to help anyone but go on Twitter and Facebook and talk trash, I have very little interest in your opinion. But if you're someone in those back tables talking to people every day who are struggling with drugs, and you are in the muck, in the mire, trying to pull people out of hell, you can disagree with me, and I'll listen to you all day long. You have earned the right to have a different opinion. Does that make sense? So again, that's my own little side note. We're all going to get there together. Actually, just because I think I have time, Christina from Bridgeway, are you still here? Come up here real quick. Give her a round of applause. So, Here's what you need to know about Christina. I've never met Christina, and she didn't know she was coming up until just a few minutes ago. So she has no speech prepared. She was not invited to be on the docket. She's doing this all impromptu. Yeah, give her a round of applause. So, Christina, talk for just a second, just a minute. Don't go 20 minutes, because we got to get these people out here. They're going to throw stuff at you. Tell them what the Bridgeway Center is, and tell them why I'm not crazy. My Baptist friend doesn't want to let me go back on Sunday because I'm trying to give these people medication. He's saying, Andre, Jesus wouldn't give them one drug to replace another. And by the way, that sounds so charming, doesn't it? Yes, I know these things. Listen, you get into a conservative conversation with me, I'll get you. I know. You got to make some choices in this world.
Can you make sure they know you're joking?
I'm joking. Presbyterians now, and the Pentecostals left a long time ago. Let me tell you, so, just kidding. But I do want to say this. I do want to say this. For some of you who are uncomfortable with the idea of trading one drug for another, I get it. I get it. Trust me, I get it. But we're going to start this conversation about why it's not that, and why medications that are better than anything we've seen before, a lot of them new to our society, have to be put in place when people are struggling, so that when they go and relapse and have a bad day, they don't die. Christina, talk about that for just a second. Tell people who you are.
Give her a round of applause.
I'm Christina. I'm now the adult care coordinator at Bridgeway. I was previously the MAT care coordinator. These medications that we are doing, so our MAT program, it is a whole wraparound service. We offer these medications to get people off of these drugs, but then they have to go in therapy, because I like to use the analogy of cancer. You can't treat kidney failure, the symptom of kidney cancer, without treating the cancer itself. These drugs are the symptom of the cancer that is driving people to use these drugs. My best friend died in 2017, 25 years old. If she had these medications, she would be here today. I am 7 years recovered myself. These medications are saving people. They are keeping people alive to treat their cancer. Because it's what it is. Childhood trauma is a cancer that drives this. So you may have a bad taste in your mouth from methadone, and that's fine, but these medications are evolving, and they are really keeping people alive so they can seek that treatment, so they can seek that help. Because people can function clearly, so they know what is wrong and how to stop using.
Thank you. We're going to get there together, folks. I'm telling you. We're going to get there together. This is all new. By the way, this is all new. So don't if there's a weirdness about this, it's okay. We're going to get there together. We're going to get there together. I just told you to trust the FDA. I know that's not a comfortable thing to say. By the way, the FDA just said that Lucky Charms are better than steak. I don't know if you saw that. Did you see that? It's a real thing. The Food and Drug Administration put out a food pyramid this week that said Lucky Charms are better for you than beef and steak. So if you don't trust the FDA, I got you. I get it. But this is an FDA-approved medication, Narcan. And it's a good thing, guys. It's a good thing. Number one, here's what we need to do. We need to get Narcan and other forms of naloxone everywhere and anywhere. This is called Cloxato. Do you know what Cloxato is? It's real simple. It's double-strength Narcan. Under a microscope, they're the exact same thing, but this is the same potency as 2 Narcans. So our organization, we had a shipment of this to give all of you one of these, and it didn't make it to you. So we're going to give you information and going to be doing a webinar next week. If you're someone who wants this, we can get this shipped to you. And if you're an organization who wants to distribute Narcan or Kloxxado, don't tell anyone, this is our little secret, okay? But currently in Tallahassee, they're about to sign legislation that will allow organizations to get not just Narcan, but Kloxxado, as many as 500 to 1,000 doses a month sent through the SOAR grant. They're just about to add this to the SOAR grant. Don't tell anyone, it's happening this week, I think, in Tallahassee. So if you're a SOAR grant, S-U-A-R, I'm gonna get all of you access to the webinar we're doing next week, and then we're gonna teach you, if you have an organization, we can get you signed up to get 500 doses of this per month to give out in the community. So yeah, give a round of applause for that. So, and here's the great thing, nobody's against Narcan. We don't have none, by the way, if you're against Narcan, don't tell anybody, because like you're the last Japanese soldier in the cave, man, after World War II. The fight's over, guys. It's not enabling people to bring them back if they're overdosing and dying. We won that conversation, rational people won it. So Narcan, we need to put this anywhere and everywhere, not just first responders, not just law enforcement, but this needs to be in schools, this needs to be in bars, this needs to be in restaurants, needs to be in first aid kits. Give me 1 second, I'll come right back to you. There's a new program that we are doing, Narcan's great. There's a new program we're doing. We encourage you to do that here, where we're putting stronger Narcan out there. Let me see if this will play.
Heard from the president talking about the border and the deadly drug problem, opioid-related deaths in America topping more than 100,000 each year. In the U.S., it hit a record in 2021 with an average of 1 death every 5 minutes. But one group in Central Florida is on the front lines of the drug crisis, handing out life-saving medication, and this is not Narcan. News Nation's Brooke Schaefer had a chance to see them in action in a News Nation exclusive. She is live now in downtown Orlando. So Brooke, what are they handing out?
Yeah, Nicole, they went around downtown Orlando handing out these boxes of Kloxxado. It's like Narcan, but it's even more powerful. That is how critical the opioid crisis is here in Central Florida. Fentanyl is showing up in more drugs than ever before. The DEA calling fentanyl the deadliest threat to our country right now.
2022 saw record months for fentanyl busts across the country. The deadly drug is pouring in mostly from the Mexico border. Just weeks ago in Florida, a police officer suffered a medical emergency after reportedly coming in contact with fentanyl during a traffic stop. Overdose deaths in the U.S. are happening so frequently. Ashley Perkins got a text. Her friend died from an overdose just before our interview.
It was just, I'm just letting you know we lost another one. And that's it. We don't even talk about it anymore. Oh, what happened? What was it? We know what it is.
In Orlando, Florida, Project Opioid founder Andre Bailey suggests the fight against fentanyl isn't just at the Mexico border. It's in our nation's downtowns.
Wherever young people are, we know there's going to be drugs, and we know that we're going to lose lives every single day.
So if this is from the first of the year, and we're talking about 9 overdoses.
Right.
So that's an overdose a day since January 1.
Yes.
Is that surprising to you?
Not at all.
Dennis Lima is the sheriff in Seminole County, about 30 minutes outside Orlando. The number of overdoses in his county went down slightly last year, but from record highs the year before.
Just last night, we had somebody using marijuana that potentially was laced with fentanyl.
Your officers, when they have their Narcan on them, and a Friday night comes around, does it sort of feel like it's not an if, but when they're going to need to use that?
Oh, they absolutely know within their first year of work, it is very likely that they will not only deploy Narcan, they will do it multiple times.
Project Opioid said overdose deaths in Florida are rising fastest in Central Florida. Fentanyl-caused deaths in Central Florida are up 172% since 2015, the group said.
This drug is unlike anything we've ever seen in American history. It's everywhere and in every drug on these streets. Again, we want to help your community get Narcan, Kloxxado into every restaurant, into schools, into our activity. If there's a place where young people are playing soccer or bars, any place like that in your community, we want to make sure that you have enough Narcan and the stronger Narcan, Kloxxado. And so we're gonna help you guys get as much of that as you need. Our state leaders are doing a really good job at making sure that that is available. What do you need to do? Some of this is a recap. Educate young people. Guys, they don't know. We made it out like it was okay to experiment with drugs as a society. We did. Wolf of Wall Street doing cocaine on the job, and Scarface, his head in a pile of cocaine, and all of our guys. And again, I'm not, listen, let me just say one thing here. I'm not anti-marijuana. I'm not here to say anything, but we made marijuana legal and didn't really even explain it to young people. We're like, marijuana is terrible, it's illegal. Oh, by the way, just kidding, it's legal. Did anyone catch that? Like, I'm not saying it should be illegal, I'm just saying a little bit of a mixed message to young people, right? You talk to young people, they don't really know the difference and the dangers between marijuana, prescription pill. They couldn't even tell you the difference between heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine. So, we need to warn them and educate young people on the dangers of drugs in a way that's different. They need to know, as much as it sounds like moralizing, one pill can kill. Everyone is dying. Fentanyl is this new thing that you didn't know about before, but can't kill you. So we need to educate young people. We have a campaign called What's the Fix that we're launching around Florida as well. Helping young people. If you don't get the joke here, it's because it's not for you. So there you go. So somebody just got it. By the way, my marketing team did not tell me the joke and let me get up in front of like state legislatures with this campaign. The WTF reference. So they totally tricked me. I think I went in front of the governor and showed him this, and they were like, which by the way, he loved it. So number 4. We're almost finished, guys. Work together. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but as a society, we don't really work together and talk much anymore when we disagree. Anyone notice that? Nah, so it's different here, right? You guys all think the same way, and when you have political differences, you just hug each other, love each other, and sing Kumbaya. Oh my gosh, Mayor, I'm moving to Crestview. So, I don't know what in the heck happened to us a few years ago as a society, but we don't like each other too much anymore, especially when we disagree. And so guys, we're never gonna agree about politics. We're never gonna agree about certain cultural wars happening right now. And don't even try, because it's a fruitless endeavor. But we can agree that 22-year-old Gage dying with a little kid is unfreaking acceptable. Right? I don't care who you voted for. I don't care what you think of Biden or Trump. None of that is important in stopping the next Gage from dying. Agreed? All right, yes, that's a round of applause worthy. So guys, let's work together. Maybe faith motivates you in here. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe you're motivated by medicine and you bring a behavioral health background into this. Maybe you're law enforcement. Maybe you're an elected official. Whatever motivates you. The people in this room showed up and stayed a long time. That means they're serious. Let's put our other differences aside and work together. This again is what we think is critically important. Guys, we have to have all of the leaders. If you run a company in here, you need to be talking to your employees about the dangers of opioids. They're facing it every day anyways. If you're a pastor in here and you're not talking to your congregation about drugs and the dangers of these drugs, you need to. Elected officials, hospitals, law enforcement. If you have teenagers, if you work in a school, every person in here has a role in working together and then looking to drive resources towards a way that we navigate someone in need. How do we know we're successful? Guys, it's very simple. If someone reaches out for help today, your community works together to make sure they don't fall through the cracks, they stay alive, and they recover. And if that's not what's happening to every person reaching out for help in your community, then you've got work to do. And I'm telling you, you can work together to get care for those in need. You know, you can align leaders, you can educate, you can create and share data, you can look at what's working and coordinate care. Take a photo of this slide, I think it's important as well. Impact, I want to see your mayor, your county leaders, law enforcement, hospitals, behavioral health centers, providers, faith community. If you guys can increase naloxone, help people get medication, expand mental health services and resources, talk to Gen Z and millennials, even though they're crazy. We gotta help them, guys. My kids are crazy, yours are crazy, but listen, we gotta help them. They're good kids, they just need love and education and guidance, or we're gonna keep losing them. And then coordinate services. Guys, if you don't have insurance, you're gonna struggle to get care. And so we gotta figure, it can't be that. Not having insurance can't be a death sentence, guys. Come on. So we can do better than that. And this reads like an eye chart, but again, this is important. This is important. How do we bring together everyone, treatment providers, leaders, the court. Someone gets out of court, they leave the criminal justice system. What a great opportunity to navigate them into some kind of treatment with medication. Guys, this is what the governor wants to do. This is where there's going to be money. There's also going to be money to train folks who, you know, in the workforce, in churches. There's going to be resources. And the fifth thing I would say, and this is the last thing I have to say, care more, judge less. Care more. Guys, and this is my last rant of the day. And then I'm going to turn it back over to your mayor. We're going to get into some groups, talk a little bit, and pick it back up a little bit later. I think we have another epidemic in America. And it's an epidemic of a lot of people who like to criticize everyone and be negative and tear down everything and everyone like that's something productive in society. When did negativity and hate and tearing people down become a currency that we value in this country? Oh yeah, please, round of applause would be good. By the way, because I got a lot of faith people in here. You realize that Christ showed up and everyone was lost. No one was doing the right thing. Even his disciples were idiots, right? He was like, "What? These guys don't get it. They don't know." So hey Jesus, when you take over with your army and run the Romans out, can we be like the top 2 people in your new kingdom on this earth? No, like they didn't get it, guys. Nobody got it. But Jesus showed up, and he cared a lot, and he didn't judge. They were lost in darkness, and he saw himself as the light to lead them to a place they couldn't get to on their own. When as a society did it become in fashion to think that being judgmental, tearing people down, even people who deserve it, is something that we should hold in high esteem? Guys, it ain't good. It ain't good. It ain't good. It ain't good. But what is good is almost 200 of you in this room today who say, enough is enough. Enough is enough. And that the care in this room and the grace in this room, guys, this opioid crisis to me it's a canary in a coal mine. So how many of you think if we're not careful, this country is in big trouble? I'd like for real, let's keep it real a second. Guys, I'm telling you, we as a society, we're in trouble, and this opioid crisis to me is a canary in the coal mine because it's really the result of our culture and our young people falling into an abyss like we've never seen before, and we don't know how to save them, right? Guys, if we can't save 100,000 young people, and we don't find value in that as a society, what do we value? Who are we, right? To me, this issue is almost like a watershed moment for this community, for our society, for this state. Guys, if we can't come together for this, what can we come together for? What has value? I stood here as you guys were telling the stories of these young people you know that you've lost. We could have ended the meeting right there. That's it. Guys, if we can't come together to help these young people and to save lives, what can we come together for? Who are we? The biggest question for you and for me and for us as a society is, who are we? And what do we believe, not on Twitter and Facebook, but what do we believe with our time, our talent, our treasure, and with our heart to help people who are less fortunate? Guys, it's all that matters. You say you're a person of faith in here? Show me your faith by how you help the poor, the needy, the vulnerable, and people who are on death's door who have made all the wrong choices. Because I gotta tell you, when I had made all the wrong choices in my life, when I had screwed my life up, just like you have, a million ways when I was younger, God didn't judge me by my worst thing, but He helped me. I'd say this, last thing I'm going to tell you, I'm going to turn it back over to the mayor. Someone asked me, Andre, why did you get involved in this? So, I have never been addicted to opioids, and when I started Project Opioid in 2018, I had never known someone who had been addicted to opioids or who had overdosed. That's not the story you were expecting, was it? In 2018, I had done a lot of work on homelessness over the years. I got out of high school, decided to get a master's degree in divinity, and through that path, I heard two messages of faith, both of which I thought were important. Message number one, you probably need to meet God through Christ, kind of an important part of the Bible, they would tell you. Some of my faith friends would tell you. But another message that I didn't hear as much was, in as much as you have done unto the least of these, so you've done unto me. And I couldn't quite reconcile how little I saw my community, my faith brethren, my family, my partners. I couldn't quite reconcile. We were big on talk, but very light on action, especially for people on the wrong side of the tracks or people who had fallen to the bottom of society. So I said, there's a lot of great people to fill a pulpit. I think I'm going to go and try to work on solving issues like poverty and homelessness. And I did that for a long time. And thank you. And in 2018, a good friend of mine who works for who said, have you ever looked into the opioid crisis? And I said, nope. I just read about it in the Wall Street Journal like you. I didn't know a lot about it. And I basically showed up to a meeting like this 5 years ago. And I heard Gage's story, and I heard Ed and his family's story. Right? And I left and I said, it caused me to ask myself a question that I'm asking you. In the midst of all these people dying who are struggling and who have been through the worst things, and that's why they're turning to drugs, who am I and who are you if we don't respond? It was a very simple question. I heard, and who am I if I don't respond? And we all do it the best we can, right? That's all I'm here to tell you guys. Challenge yourself today with the blessings you have to be the person that you know that God created you to be. Work together in a way that is uncommon in our society today. Guys, we can change this crisis in this community. You get it? We can change this crisis. Guys, I'm going to turn it back over to your mayor. He's going to separate you into groups. Thank you for having me here today. It has been a pleasure, and this is not the last time we will see each other.
Why, that was so inspiring. Thank you so much, Andre. I think I'll step down as mayor and join you in that group. I mean, really, it takes a lot of care and concern to do something like that, and I appreciate you joining us here today.